let's get weird. So do you know who Octavia Hatcher is? And if you don't, I'm going to tell you. Octavia Hatcher was from Pikeville, Kentucky, and she is one of the first people to have ever been found buried alive. Octavia Hatcher married this man named James Hatcher, who was one of the wealthiest men in Kentucky, I believe, at that time. Octavia was 20 years old in 1891 when she gave birth to her only son, Jacob. Now, unfortunately, Jacob passed away pretty much right after birth, which sent Octavia into this deep, dark depression where she just was not leaving the bed for days. Very, very dark time. Now, it's believed that Jacob was born in April, and that's when the depression started as well. By May 2nd is when Octavia Hatcher died. Now, before I go into that, I'm going to go into telling you a little bit about her husband, James, because it is significant. I mentioned that he was a wealthy businessman. He owned what was the Hatcher Hotel in Pikeville, Kentucky, which he had some curiosities of his own because there was a museum inside the hotel which displayed things like James's personal coffin, which he had personally fixed to what he wanted it to be, an iron lung, and other odd things for that time. Now, James eventually had his coffin reworked, and he had a self-opening mechanism and also had a bell in his coffin so that I guess if he were to wake up, then he'd be able to alert people. James did not, however, just own a hotel. He owned steamboats and storage and shares in timber, and he did a little bit of everything. He was said to be the type of man that didn't just go into something a little bit. He went in fully, and if it failed, it failed, but if it took off, then it made massive amounts of money. Now, this is a personal photo that I took of Octavia's grave, and her monument is what makes this story so significant. So, on May 2nd is when Octavia Hatcher died. At that time, there was a virus going around which was causing a lot of people to go into a coma and then end up dying. Now, because it was Pikeville and it was unreasonably hot, they just went ahead and buried her. She was never embalmed or reworked or anything like that. She just died and went into the ground. Shortly after that, a lot of other people who were dying, I guess, had been put in storage, and they began to wake back up. And experts believe that what happened during that time is that the virus was being carried by a mosquito bite, and it was causing people to become so ill that their vitals were just slowing down so much that they were undetectable. So when they realized that people were waking up, they rushed up to Octavia's grave, and it had only been a couple of days later. They dig it up, they open the casket, and that's when they find a grisly scene. Her face was said to have been contorted, and her fingernails had been ripped from her hands because she was digging at the coffin trying to get out. But she had passed away, sadly. And this, without a doubt, sent James into a downward spiral. He had lost his infant son, he had lost his wife, and then realized that he may have not lost his wife, just to realize that he did, in a horrible manner. So he decided that what he wanted to do was he wanted to build a monument of Octavia, which would overlook the Hatcher Hotel. And it was said to bring him comfort that she was looking down on him and that he could look up and see her. And that's just what he did. He built a monument that was Octavia, and originally she was holding baby Jacob in her arms. But unfortunately, vandals over the years kind of kept messing with the statue until baby Jacob was broken off, which is why Octavia is missing one of her arms. Here's where you can see her arm. And this is baby Jacob. And I believe his monument, I can't see too well, but I believe it says our baby Jacob. These monuments were made in Italy. And you can imagine in 1891 how expensive that would have been to have it made and imported. But James didn't care. And he went on to live the rest of his life. He never remarried. He ended up dying, I believe he was in his 80s. There are many letters written by James, and he never mentions her death. He only ever mentions her warmingly as the love of his life. James never went on to have any more kids. He lived the rest of his life loving Octavia. Her stories is one of the most interesting and one of the most well-known in Pikeville. There are a lot of other little stories like that, but Octavia's monument is one of the most visited areas in Pikeville, Kentucky. And honestly, I can see why, because I've went there and it is one of my favorite places to go because I enjoy graveyards. That's just me. But this specific graveyard holds so much peace. It's just so peaceful. I actually have a photo shoot that was done in that specific graveyard, not with her monument, but it's just a sad situation all around that she was a young mom who didn't get to know her baby and then didn't really get to know her husband. It was a short marriage, and it's a sad situation that she ended up passing away the way that she did. And she is largely one of the reasons as to why graveyards back in those times installed the bell mechanism, which was there was a bell that was attached to a string that went down into the coffins. I hope you enjoy this story, and I always encourage you to do your own research. There's plenty on Google about Octavia.